what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hi, it's Joe Tyndall again. This is episode 45 of Occupy TV, and I have Benjamin Crandall with us. This is the second time he's been on the show, and I think we're going to have him here, with some regularity, because talking about the concept of a gift economy, I think, is something that we need to do a whole lot more. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Joe.
And I guess we were talking just before we started about where you came from. Mm-hmm. So how did you get started in all of this? And okay. Please tell us.
In the early 2000s, I was working at an environmental nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and I started to get really frustrated with kind of the pay scale and the divergence between the amount of work people were doing and what their pay was. Everybody was doing great work where I worked, and it wasn't about that, but it seemed that I was getting a small fraction of what other people were getting, and it didn't seem to have any relation to the amount of contribution that I was doing. And so I was realizing that if this is a nonprofit, I realized how much worse it is in corporations where CEOs are making hundreds of thousands of times even, if they've got sweatshop labor in some third world country. It's so divorced, the amount of work people have, the contribution people have to society versus what their access to resources is based on that. And so I started getting really frustrated with that dynamic, and in 2003, I was listening to an NPR show about how in the 2002 elections, 97 or 98% of the congressional races were won by the candidate that had the most contributions. And that really put the nail in the coffin in terms of my belief in democracy, that we live in anything like a democracy when elections are basically bought and sold. Mm-hmm. So that got me thinking why that dynamic is, and I started thinking about where all that money comes from that elections are being bought with, and realized ultimately comes from us because every dollar that a corporation earns is spent by a consumer, and most of the consumers are, I guess for lack of a better way of framing it, the 99%. Yeah. Which that idea wasn't in the mainstream consciousness at that point, this terminology of the 99%. But I realized that the 99% is basically doing the majority of the labor, and they're doing the majority of the spending, and so they exploit themselves twice in that process. And so at that time, I was interested in creating internet solutions to help people figure out who is contributing and support those people, A little better information. Yeah, better information. Yep.
Yeah, I remember taking a college class, this is about 20 years ago, in economics. I'd already taken some economics classes before that, but then the professor sat there and said something that really stuck with me. He said, the only factor of production is labor. That's the only creator of wealth is people applying labor. And so my hand immediately goes up, and it's like, excuse me, what about capital? What about management ability and all this? Because I've been taught all that stuff in grammar school, okay, about, you have to, management ability is so important and capital is so important. And he says, no. That's also labor, okay? I mean, capital is just past labor. And that's been accumulated and used so that we can fund current activities. And we began to go through, and every one of the factors, it's like, he's right. It's all about labor. And so we have this cooperation versus competition thing, where cooperation is about getting the job done, but competition is who's going to get the money from
the benefit from it.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's not, moving forward is not about competition. It's about cooperation.
Absolutely, yeah. And I saw on the screen introducing us that this shows for the 99%. I hope that really this shows for everybody. I mean, our current economy really isn't working for anybody, even the top percent, even if they might think it's working for them.
Yeah.
Like it's a dysfunctional system for everybody.
To put it mildly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so how do we fix it?
How do we fix it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that we hit the nail on the head. We have to create a cooperative society.
Yeah.
And that means that we need a society where really everybody's needs are getting met, and we need a society where everybody's gifts to the world are being fully realized, and so where everybody's really able to fully give their contribution that they have to the world.
Yeah, the issue for a lot of things, that, or at least as I'm getting older, I'm finding it harder and harder and harder to kind of will myself through doing things I don't want to do. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same way
Absolutely.
in the workplace, that there's no real meaning in what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so when Occupy came along, all of a sudden I had something that seemed like it was worth doing. Showing up at the camp every day, sort of helping out, made a huge impact, because I was like, for the first time in a long time, I was like getting up in the morning and going, I got something to do today. It was a little different, but
Yeah, and I would like for everybody to feel that way every day, like that we're really doing what we want to be doing with our lives in a way that helps other people. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go right to, you've been writing a website for people to do gift exchange, essentially. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so actually I've got a partner in this. His name is Eamon Walker, and he's the lead developer on the project in terms of the actual programming. And yeah, we've been working on this, the software development since January, basically, and we just launched it in Eugene about a month ago. So
yeah, we actually visited it today, just before the show, and so I'm now signed up on there. But interesting. So yeah, tell us more.
So essentially, it serves a couple of different purposes. One, it's basically. We talked about it last show a little bit, but what gift economy is essentially is a system of economics that doesn't require money. And it doesn't even require barter. So essentially, before money and barter, most of our society operated on a gift economy, which means that people lived in small enough communities where everybody knew each other's reputation. Everybody knew what everybody was contributing, and everybody knew who to go to get certain needs met, to get what needs met. And that's basically what this software, Kindista, does. It's a place, it's a database where you can enter in what you have to offer your community and what you need from the community to, for a, to thrive in your life, and then a way for people to acknowledge the gifts they've received from other people, so that other people in the system will know who they can trust. Who else is contributing, basically.
Yeah, so that gets back to the whole concept of information in the society. And we talked a little bit about this again earlier, sort of a lively conversation for about almost an hour before we actually started the show. But we were talking a little bit about Adam Smith and The Wealth of Nations. And it's probably one of the most misquoted books around. In the sense that he talked largely about small economies, again, where people knew each other, the village. And for example, you might have two blacksmiths, one of whom is a nice guy, and the other one, dumps his, stuff in the river and is obnoxious and all that. Everyone in the village will know that. Okay, and so they will reward the person who does good work and keeps his place clean and meets community standards, and they will shun the one who does not. Okay, and as long as that information is present, then businesses have an incentive to act responsibly. But once you disconnect the information from actual behavior, and that occurs a lot with large corporations, then your economy begins to break down. And that's only one of several market failure mechanisms that we see thriving today. So comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that, with everything that you're saying there. I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, it seems pretty self-evident. our whole governance system and media system perpetuates ignorance, basically.
It creates it.
It creates ignorance.
It actually manufactures. Yeah. I mean, you may be dumping your toxic waste, but you've got these wonderful advertisements to do public relations talking about how good you are. So you've not only are people not aware of the particulars, but of the bad behavior, but you're also creating this image that you're a good world citizen, when in fact your corporation probably isn't.
And so much scarcity has been produced in our society that people have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make a living, so they don't have time to inform themselves outside of what they're getting on TV in between, when they're watching dinner or whatever.
So let's key on that word of scarcity. Okay, so without scarcity, you can't have a profit.
It's true.
Because in a competitive market, what will happen is if people look out and see someone making a profit, they'll go, oh, time to enter that marketplace, at which point they will increase the supply, which has the effect of lowering the cost to the point where no one makes a profit anymore. And that's how Adam Smith's magic invisible guiding hand pushes, profit out of the system. But the whole thing is the right wing has picked up that invisible guiding hand metaphor and misrepresented it in the sense of saying, well, the invisible guiding hand makes profit. No, it doesn't. The invisible guiding hand removes profit from the system, at which point you can then make the argument, if there is no profit being extracted and the maximum number of people are being served by the best quality product, you can, because your system is now has built-in incentives to improve its performance, then you can make the argument that resources are being optimally distributed. But today we don't have that situation. If a company is making a profit, there is some market failure that allows that profit to be made.
Yeah, and now we have, I think it was, might have been a Rolling Stone, I forget what the article was recently, but there's an article of the top 0.001% of the world's population, something like that, hiding $21 trillion in offshore accounts. And so that's like all, that's basically capital that everybody else in the society is desperately seeking for to pay back all their loans that they have, and nobody can pay it back. So it's another scarcity that's been created where people are just scrambling for chairs that don't exist, musical chairs that don't exist.
But that's in the nature of the system, in that we issue enough money, okay, to do whatever it was we wanted, but we never issued the money to pay the interest on the money that we issued. So we're always behind.
That's true.
And even if the stuff is buried in other accounts, the system is fundamentally flawed because it can never resolve itself because there's not enough money to pay the interest.
Well, I mean, that's the other side of that. It's true that money isn't being created for that, but it's constantly being funneled. So if you can imagine, if we had a society where, so if I'm the banker and I give you a loan for $100, and you make that $100, if I charge interest on that, but I immediately spent that interest back into the economy, right? Although I would benefit unfairly from that, at least that money would be back into the economy for somebody else to pay back their loan. But the fact that it gets hoarded, that it gets held in offshore accounts, it prevents people from getting access to that money to pay back their debts. So it's both an accumulation and a prevention of the scarcity for being resolved.
So in other words, we have again, as in any other market, manufactured a shortage.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, which then raises the ability to charge interest for the use of money. Okay. So this behavior has been going on a long time.
Yeah.
It used to be that the kings would just collect the taxes and kill the people they didn't like. Now you have to be a little more creative about it. You have to actually produce a product, but the effect is the same. The effect is the same. So gift economy. How is that different, and how are we going to get there?
Yeah, so let's talk about, I think it's important to have an understanding of the mentality of gift economy and how that mentality is different from a monetary economy or a barter economy, because a lot of people tend to equate in their mind, if they're not familiar with gift economy, frequently when I have conversations with people, they equate it to barter economy. And so in a monetary economy, especially in a monetary economy where the money is backed by interest-bearing debt, like our current economy, there's a scarcity that we've been talking about. And so all of us are essentially in competition with each other for a limited resource of money. So it's very hard for us to be generous, like at a fundamental core level, like an unconscious level. It's very hard for us to be generous with each other when we, at a deep level, we know there's not enough to go around. And so we have husband and wives that fight about the bills and who's paying more and all of that kind of thing. People that love each other dearly, but they fight around money. And that happens throughout our whole society because it creates embedded in the system competition. So in a barter economy, in a barter economy, we have value to each other to the extent which the other can contribute to us.
Right.
And so we're a monetary economy, we're in competition with everybody and in essence disposable to each other. If we have enough money, then it doesn't matter what I do, how I alienate you or alienate myself from you. I can find somebody else to get my needs met because I have enough money. And I use money basically to to encourage people to give whatever they have to me, regardless of what I've done to get that money. In a barter economy, I see everybody who has something that I need and who needs what I have as somebody of value to me, and I want to maintain those relationships. So the people that I interact with economically become valuable at a very deep level. The difference there, though, is that I'm only placing value on the people that have something that I need,
Right.
And who need what I have. And so, so a gift economy basically takes that one step further to put value on everybody in our community. And so it creates an understanding that the better off my community is, the better off I'll be. And if we're all, really expressing our gifts to the highest extent and serving each other to the highest extent, we'll all be better off for that. And so even if I'm not getting anything directly of benefit from you and you need what I have, if I'm able to, I'll give you what I have because I see that you're contributing to somebody else or many other people in some way that I find valuable.
All right. Yeah, as someone who has a fairly large skill set, for example, fixing computers is an issue. There are some people I don't mind fixing computers for. There are other people who come by and want me to do it for them for free, who I do have a problem with. So how do we get, and you get to the point where you say, nah, I'm just not going to do that anymore, and you make these general statements where it's really the sense of being abused by someone who shouldn't be abusing you anyway. In Eugene, people, there's a tendency for people to try to get you to do things for free just as part of the whole culture here. But how would it be different? How would it, how would this be different? So you have this website, and we were up there earlier, and we have basically two columns. We have the things that people did for other people, and we have the things that they want, that they're
offering. So it's three columns.
Three columns. Yeah. And the third one is?
Yeah, so it's what things that people have already done for each other.
Right.
There's things that people are offering to other people and things that people need from other people. So those are the three columns that are the three areas that people most interact with.
And then I noticed that there's also people can make comments about what it was that you did.
Yes.
So
if they were part of that so it's not any random person can't make comments, but people that were part. If I gave you something, you could.
I could say, yeah, he did a nice job, and that was good. So you get, it's kind of like social networking, but you get rated based on what you actually did.
Yeah, and it's not rated in a quantitative way, but people give you qualitative feedback. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's it all seems to be very basic and seems to make a lot of sense.
So in your question, your concern is if you've got a lot of skill set, and everybody's coming to you all the time for things because you have a lot that you can offer the community. I think that my partner in this project, Eamon, and I, we have similar issues, like people coming to us and so for us, there's two things. One, there's an important element that isn't totally met at this point, which is getting our needs met. So
Right.
Eamon and I don't totally get our needs met, or at least I don't totally get my needs met through the system. Eamon mostly gets his needs met at this point through the system, but I don't at this point. I have to rely a lot on money still. And but if I was getting my needs met totally through the system, and I didn't have to concern myself too much with that side of things, how I was going to get my needs met, the mentality that I can focus on is how can I be of greatest service to my community. Right. And that's what we're inviting people into, that mentality of how can I be the greatest service to my community. And so if one person comes to you, or if multiple people come to you for what you have to offer, like you can think to yourself, which of these people helping them, which of them is going to help more people,
right.
like in total, or like how? I mean, that's essentially what the criteria that we go by is how can I be the greatest service to my community. And so a person might make different decisions based on that. And that's not to say that no one ever is going to help people that aren't contributing to the system. There are people that are sick, and there are people that have, mental problems or other problems that make it difficult for them to contribute to other people. But that's for each person to decide who they want to support in the community. There's nobody, unlike communism or something like that, there's no top-down mechanism that's telling you who to support.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about money. What is money actually about? And sort of as a starter on that, years ago, a definition that was suggested to me that made a lot of sense, is that money is a claim on the assets in the society. It is an indicator that you have contributed to the overall economic pool.
Yeah, and those are two separate roles.
They are, but they are to some extent linked. So money becomes sort of an exchange mechanism in the sense that if you do something, you get some money, which you can then take to someplace else and trade that for someone else doing something. So let's talk about money. Is there something different about that, or other thoughts, or how does money function?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I think we've discussed earlier today, and probably in the last interview, unfortunately, I think in our society, those two roles have gotten quite diverged from each other, in that through money, people can have access to significant claims to society without contributing anything positively, and sometimes actually contributing very negatively to society as an arms dealer or a drug runner or something like that. Somebody can, or in some ways a hedge fund manager, or somebody who goes in and
Mitt Romney,
somebody who goes in,
break up companies and put people out of business and ship the jobs overseas and all that so that you can make more money.
Exactly. Yeah, and so. And make more money, so they get greater and greater claims on society's wealth, on society's resources, without creating anything of real value for society.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the things, the concept of creating value, in the sense that if, for example, you are, let's take cigarettes. Okay, if you produce cigarettes, then what happens is you also produce cancer, which means that now we've got all these doctors and nurses who can, be employed because you've caused somebody to get cancer. Now, you made a profit making cigarettes, but you've also created all this extra economic activity. So, a cancer patient, for example, is an example of an economic stimulus in our current system.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, so what we're talking about is our definition of what economic activity is, and that all economic activity is equal. Like that's one of the problems with
major myth,
and that's one of the problems with money is that it makes everything that money can define becomes equivalent in some way through money, which is a real problem. So, I mean, a simpler thing of what you're talking about is if you pay 100 people to go dig holes and then have 100 people follow them and fill those holes back up, like that, you're creating economic activity.
Or you pay people, to fill those holes with toxic waste.
Yeah.
and
then somebody else to come clean it up after
the toxic
that.
waste up. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, it's a variety of ways of us not actually creating, having economic activity without creating value for society. So those two things are not the same. It's very possible to have a lot of activity without creating any value.
Exactly. A lot of activity without value. So I sort of look at the gift economy thing as you're talking about, and saying, okay, well, things won't get done unless it creates value for someone.
Exactly.
So different set of incentives.
Totally different set of incentives.
Changing the underlying reasons for playing the game. So not so much the rules as the reasons.
Yeah.
So, okay, so money, again, how do we use it? Because now what you've got is, let's say you use a site like yours where person A contributes a whole lot. Now, how does that benefit them? If they wind up with, yeah, this guy did this thing and he did a great job and he's done all this stuff, how does that benefit someone?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. One, I think that it's very important that we start shifting our way of using language. So if you talk about, it's very easy to look at TV today, especially the news, and especially Fox News, for great examples of how language is controlled and how thought process is controlled through the way that language. So you have this concept of job creators, right? Which is saying that it's creating a myth that people that are the wealthiest are creating a lot of value, even if the jobs are not creating value for society. So I could be, for example, making cigarettes, and I'm a job creator. If I have employed people to make cigarettes, but it's not necessarily creating value for society. And once again, there's no necessary relationship between the two.
Okay.
And so,
well, you're also creating all those jobs for nurses and doctors.
Exactly.
Okay, and undertakers, and oxygen providers for assistance in breathing, and all the rest of that.
I think that we'd rather have, instead of that, we'd rather have more people that are building sustainable houses, or that are building sustainable transportation, or better solar power, or better. There's a lot of ways that we could be investing those hours of people's lives in ways that are of greater benefit for the world. Art and music and education and childcare, and smaller classrooms and all those kind of things. So it's not a matter of the number of jobs. It's a matter of are those jobs being geared towards things that really help everybody.
It's a question.
Create the world that we all want to live in.
I guess the question comes down to, how do you want to live your life? Do you want to just contribute, feel good about what you're doing, and not have a large impact, or do you want to be, rich? So.
And then once again, we're talking about what our definition of words is, and so right now we use the word rich to describe somebody who has often hoarded or amassed a lot of financial wealth.
Right.
Or
inherited it.
And so in that case, not even done anything of value at all.
I mean, most of the great fortunes have been built over many generations, and they've usually been built on some kind of exploitation, like slavery, or extracting mineral resources on Native American lands, or banking, or that kind of stuff. Where banking is where you create money out of thin air and charge people to use it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and so I think the first step in the gift economy, or in any systemic change of our current economy, is to change how we use words. And so we need to start talking about somebody who, not the person who has the most is wealthy, but the person who gives the most is wealthy. And the person who has the most and isn't giving it away, who's hoarding the most, is somebody who's poor.
But how do we create the situation in which the person who gives the most is the wealthiest?
Well, it's by valuing that person.
Okay, well, how do we do that?
Well, one of the ways is through the software that we've created, so that you can see, who is showing up a lot as giving, and through the software, and asking them what they need. You know, making sure that their needs are met. You know, giving them recognition, public recognition that they are that they're supporting the community in a substantial way.
Okay.
I mean, that's what wealth is. Wealth is a form of power, and right now there's no.
But to some extent, that also creates its own competition. So let's say we rate people. This person has done 727 gifts. Okay, that puts you number one in the list. So everybody looks at you and says, I got to contribute to that person. So are we not, in fact, creating a competitive situation within something like this?
Well, I don't think that it's necessarily, there's two ways I could answer that question.
Okay.
One is I don't think that somebody who is giving the most, I don't think everybody's necessarily going to see how much they can give that person.
Right.
We are going to see as a society, make sure that their needs are getting met, because if they're really giving a lot, we want them to not have to worry about what they're getting from society so that they can focus on giving, right? And so I think that on the other side of it, it does create a competition towards making a better world. Like, and if we're going to have a competition, I think that's the kind of competition to have. Like, not like who can have the most, but like
who can give the most?
Yeah, who can give the most? Who can create a world that helps the most people? Like that would affect a very different world that we'd live in.
Okay, so have you thought about that kind of stuff? I mean, the software is in fairly early stages.
Yes.
But have you thought about sort of identifying top contributors, or is that something you don't want to go into?
That's not, in our vision, that's not for us. Like the whole purpose of the software is for the community to determine
figure
things
it out
itself.
on their own.
It's like we're not trying to create new top-down solutions. Okay. Where like we as a small group of people are deciding, or any kind of algorithm. I mean, the whole software is based on qualitative assessments of people and qualitative, basically thanking people for what they've done for you. And it's not up to for me to say which gift is more significant than another for somebody else. Like I can say for me, personally, if I'm looking at a number of people's gifts, I can decide which gifts I think are most significant for my community. And I can choose to give my gifts based on that information. But it's not, we think it's not correct for us to be able to say which gifts are most important for other people.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see. Yeah, we've been talking, some about the economics. Earlier, we wound up starting to talk about kind of the future and energy and, sort of solar power coming into existence and, depletion of resources and all that kind of stuff. So how would this whole gift economy concept work towards, sustainability, in other words, providing, say, energy in the future? Yeah, well,
at the end of our last interview, we started talking about, right towards the end, intellectual property.
Right.
And we didn't really get to finish it. And so I think this is...
Well, that's a good place to go.
Yeah, well, it's very much related to these questions that you're asking. Right now, we have intellectual property to make sure that people that are putting their resources into expanding our knowledge base, that they are being supported by the society, right? And so essentially, if I'm going to dedicate 5 years of my life towards something that doesn't, where I don't have anything to offer society for those 5 years, and it's only at the end of the 5 years that I have something to offer the society. Well, our current economy is structured that I would get in debt for those 5 years.
Yep.
And then at the end of the 5 years, I would have intellectual property that I could use to pay off my debt and then make some money off of.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky, yeah. And so that's the basic model that we have right now for the reason behind intellectual property. In a gift economy, we don't need a lot of that. So if the community is acknowledging that I'm really doing great things to advance our understanding of solar energy, for example, the community can decide to support me on that basis itself, and I don't have to get in debt for that. And then I'm able to, then I'm able to contribute my understanding with other people's understanding, like collaborate in a way that doesn't require intellectual property. going back, like I think it's important to look at what intellectual property is, and which is the ownership of ideas,
Right.
which is, in my estimation, an absurd idea, because all of the language that we use to construct those ideas is given by other people. We can't even conceptualize ideas without the language that has been given to us, and the fragments of conceptualization that we use to formulate a specific idea have also been given by other people, and we just luck out to be in a certain position to get this piece of information and that piece of information, and then totally be blessed by some epiphany that puts it all together that wasn't really our doing, it just happened, you know? And so our idea that we take ownership of this process that we just basically were blessed to be a part of, I think is a really misguided way of doing it. It's necessary in a monetary economy because there's no way to be supported by the community in a monetary economy without that. But in a gift economy, we could easily collaborate in ways that we're not able to in a monetary economy, and our advances in solar energy and energy storage and energy transmission and all these kind of things would be exponentially faster than they are in our current economy. So I think that a lot of our ideas of scarcity around energy are due to the economic system that we're engaged in right now.
Well, again, we have to manufacture a sense of shortage in order to generate or to extract wealth to generate a profit.
Yeah, and right now there's a open source project for, I think it's 50 tools that could make any other tool, and I forget the website that you can go to check out about this, but it's an open source project, and the idea is designs for 50 tools that could be the combination of these 50 tools could make any other tool. And so the idea there is that if any community had all 50 of these tools, they could manufacture anything they wanted using those 50 tools. And it's an open source project, and the idea is that we could all be self-sufficient on a community level if we're contributing to that way of doing things industrially.
But that looks at organizing on a smaller, more local level, which I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, we are coming into a post-petroleum world, so the amount of transportation that we're going to do, maybe not this week, maybe not this year, but 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, as energy becomes more difficult to acquire, we're going to be doing a lot less transportation. The economies are going to become more local.
Well, I think we're going to be doing a lot different transportation. I think it depends how we make this transition. I mean, I think that if we start sharing a dramatic amount of information, you know, we could create electric rail transportation across the country and run that with alternative energy. Like, that would not be hard for us to do, and it would require a lot less energy than we're using right now for roads and cars.
Right.
You know, and so I think that we could create systems that allow us to have transportation on a regional and global scale, but it would look very different than it currently does.
Yeah, I think transportation is an issue, but you also have, you know, just in general providing food. So what are local needs? I mean, so in other words, on your website, let's say somebody says, I can do computer repair, but I need to eat. Okay, so that's probably a good, I should put that up there on the site and say, you know, here's a possibility, or I can you know, design energy systems, but I need to eat. So let's see how that plays. So I think we'll play with that for a couple of weeks and see what we get out of that. But so what do you think will happen if I were to go up and put that up there? What do you think?
Well, I think it's really early right now, so we don't have enough active users on the site that really anybody's needs are going to get met totally through the site yet, or very few people. I mean, as I said, my partner Eamon is getting most of his needs met right now through people that are engaged with the site, but he's a rare case at this point. People are getting more and more of their needs met, but I think it will take, you know, a real culture of users to make that happen. And so, I mean, I've gotten food from the site so far, and I know lots of people that have gotten food from the site.
Well, now's probably the time to get food.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a fair amount
There's a lot
out
of food
there.
going on.
We got a pile of zucchinis here.
Yes.
Come fix our computer.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So, Getch was bringing up the question earlier about, say, could we create in this environment something like a large project? Let's say we wanted to make a movie. And I guess it depends on your attitude about what a film is about. You know, do we need people running around shooting, you know, doing, you know, explosions and stuff like that? But let's say that we wanted to make a, you know, a good, interesting story and do it visually. Could such a large project be created using this kind of a system? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that it could, the system itself could help organize that, but more importantly is people's internal motivation. And so, like, for example, right now we have Linux, the Linux movement, the open source software movement, where we have, you know, thousands and thousands of programmers around the world that are working together, collaborating on very substantial projects. So projects that run the data, you know, all the data centers, or the majority of the data centers in the world are run on Linux. Yeah, and so that is an enormous undertaking that is done basically through gift economy. It's not organized through Kindista or any site like that, but the motivation is there, and people want to give. They have an idea of what they want to give the world, and they're making it happen. And I think that, for example, this project Kindista itself is that. So Eamon and I haven't received any financial. On the contrary, I mean, I've put out a substantial amount of financial resources towards this, and both of us have spent, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours on this project so far. And that's basically because we want to see this come into the world, and that's our motivation of doing it. We think that that is the greatest benefit that we can have towards the world with our time. That's our decision on that, and so that's it's more of a motivation thing than anything else. But we do hope, as we create a culture of generosity and people getting more of their needs met through gifting, that people become more comfortable. Maybe not putting all of my time with gifting, but maybe I'll work half time for money and half time in projects that I really care about. And so, as you're saying, everything, all of our economy and all money is backed really by labor.
Right.
And so it's a matter of how much labor are we going to contribute to gift economy.
Right.
And it's not an all or nothing. People can kind of gradually go into it and start getting more of their needs met.
Yeah, because the thing is that a lot of people are sort of stuck in this wage slave condition, where you've got a mortgage, you got a car payment, you got kids, you got whatever, and so you just have to keep cranking, doing this stuff. And every hour that you work makes some rich person richer, because the system is structured in that particular manner, and you have to keep doing it, otherwise your world collapses.
Yeah.
So I guess transitioning out of that becomes, you know, a problem. How do people transition out of it?
I would say yes and no. I would say that I mentioned this statistic last time, which is that a third of our adult population doesn't have any labor that they're getting income for.
Okay.
So right now, a third of our population is either retired or unemployed and not receiving benefits for it, or I think that does include unemployed people that are receiving benefits as well. So there's a lot of people that have time on their hands, a third of the population, which is a huge resource of labor that's available, that could be going towards this. And if a third, I mean, just imagine all of the needs that would be met through that third of the population contributing in that way. And that's without any of the other people doing anything with it. And so I think there's a lot of capacity that isn't being used right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that just sort of struck me as you were saying this is I've been putting a fair amount of effort into sort of designing and building support for Homeless Village. Okay, so do you think something like that could be run through your website and see what we find regarding that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's when you signed up for your account, there's two accounts that you can sign up for. You can sign up for an individual, I'm a person, or I'm a group or a project, right? And so somebody would need to create an account for the project, and people would have to give gifts of their time and labor to the project, and the project would, people would have to acknowledge that they were getting benefit from that project and that kind of thing. But it would...
An opportunity has presented itself. It's like, oh, okay, we could actually do this.
Yeah, and it's a place where you could say everything that you need from the community to make your project work well. All the resources you need. And yeah.
Cool. So, yeah. Okay, so we'll have to, after this show, we're gonna have to do that.
Dig into that, yeah. And it's on there, so you got some motivation behind that.
Yeah, so put the website up there a few times here, Getch. Yeah, so it's, how'd you come up with the name?
Kindista, well, it's really challenging. This is back to our intellectual property thing, which is that right now, internet squatters are sitting on thousands and thousands of great names for sites, and so we went through a couple months of toying with different names, and basically we wanted something where we would be able to buy the .com, the .org, and the .net, so we have all of those for Kindista, and we wanted something that had a flavor of what the kind of world that we're trying to create, and so Kindista basically means one who practices kindness, so Kindista, Ista is one who practices, so that's the kind of the etymology of the name.
Okay, so that's where barista came from?
Yeah, one who practices barring.
So, okay, so we got about 10 more minutes left, and let's see, any particular thoughts and places you want to go with the conversation?
Well, I think that what's really needed at this point is for people to take whatever steps they can in this direction. And so those steps, there's a lot of different steps, and it's not going to look the same for each person. Not everybody wants to be on the internet. I mean, actually, there's a lot of people that we interact with that want to be and are actually very deeply involved in gift economy, but they don't want to have anything to do with the internet, and that's totally fine. We don't think that everybody should be online necessarily. And then we have, and then there's people that are heavily online, where they do a lot of things online. And then there's people that are some of both. So like, we have a friend, Kim Kirchbaum, who does a lot of facilitation, interpersonal facilitation in Eugene, and he's created these gift circles. And so gift circles are kind of like Kindista, but in person. So people sit around and they all say what they have to offer and what they need. And they're probably not going to get all their needs met in that. It takes, in my experience doing one of these, it takes about an hour per 10 people to say all their offers and requests and to do that. And so that means people's attention span is usually not more than 2 hours, so you can't have more than 20 people really involved in one of these things, and you're not going to get all of your needs met from any group of 20 people in our society. So but it does help with a lot of the interpersonal skills and getting over like people's emotional blocks around this transition. I mean, I think that there's, in a monetary economy, we have a certain sense of power and entitlement that we've gotten very comfortable with. If I have money, then I can just get what I need, right? And when I need it, when I want it, right? And so that there's that sense of power and entitlement. And in a gift economy, you have to adopt a mentality of gratitude, and where you're basically at the mercy of your community, and you really have to rely on your community in a very different way, and so that it requires some interpersonal growth and self-work to really thrive in this kind of a system. And so these gift circle groups that Kim is doing are really helpful for working through that stuff. So different people some people are going to just do things mostly using an online tool like Kindista, and there's some other software out there that is doing similar things. And some people are going to do a lot of some of both, some in-person kind of working through their challenges around this and participating online, and some people are going to do mostly just non-technical, person-to-person networking to try to get their needs met. And all those are already happening, but my hope is that each of those will continue to grow. And then, as I said before, it's very important that we start changing our our language, and so that we refuse to use the word prosperity in regards to an individual person. Like, it's impossible for a person to be, like, from one way of looking at it, it's impossible for one person to be prosperous, but the community to be faltering.
And if you're in a gift economy.
Well, yeah, and
if you're in a money economy, one person can be prospering and your whole area can be, in a depression.
Well, that only goes so far. If everybody's dead, right, you're going to have a hard time surviving on your own. And pretty much everybody is, our society, it's very hard for an individual person to survive in nature on their own.
Right.
For very long, and so we really aren't islands into ourselves. We do rely on other people, and we will be better off if those people are thriving too. But it requires looking past some beliefs that we've adopted as a culture.
Yeah, a lot of the sacred myths. Actually, I've been reading this book. Susan Strong was our last guest, and she came up with this book about making our message and using metaphors and talking American in the sense that we need to capture back a lot of the mythology about who Americans are and
absolutely what freedom is,
what freedom really is. Freedom is not enough money to buy your way out of any situation you're in. That's not
freedom. Is not the ability to militarily dominate the rest of the world.
No, it is not. But the change in the metaphor, in the sense of looking at stories, because people don't respond to facts, they respond to stories.
Absolutely, and emotion.
And so now, how are we going to talk about this? What sort of, if we're going to be trying to make a transition to a gift economy, and I personally think it's a good thing to do, how are we going to be selling that? How are we going to be creating stories to let people know that this is something they should be looking at?
Well, I think it's going to be an iterative process. I think it's going to be a collaborative process, and I think it needs to be everywhere. So I think people need to think really carefully about what they choose to post on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, we're going to be adding a discussion functionality to Kindista as well for people to kind of to list announcements, but also to discuss all these concepts that we're talking about and create a dialogue around them. So if you're using online social media or blogging or that kind of thing, it's very important that we think about our choices of words and that we discuss them with other people, and that we let go of old usages of words when we realize that there's a better way of using a word that is more helpful for our collective nature.
Can you give an example of that?
Well, we've already talked about wealth, that's one. We could talk about, instead of talking about job creators, we could talk about value creators, who's creating the most value for our communities. And so it's things like that we can just really look closely at our choices of words. And like eco-terrorism, like that's a horrible word. It's like somebody who's trying to protect the environment is a terrorist.
Right.
So we need to, forest defenders is,
it's a better way to put it. But again, the question is, which group of people is putting out the language?
But it doesn't matter.
It's the question of what we pick up and use.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. And part of it is choosing to get our media from each other instead of corporations. Like, if we get all of our media from CNN and from Fox, like, inevitably we'll end up unconsciously using some of that terminology.
Right.
The more we get our languaging from each other and from Facebook, the people that we really rely on and trust in Facebook or in Kindista or blogging or our conversations that we have with each other, all this the more we really are conscious of our language and who we're getting our languaging from, like, the better off we'll all be.
Okay. So we've been talking about money some, and earlier we also talked about the whole concept of the sort of money system collapsing on itself. And so that things like the gift economy would be a substitute for that we want to have in place prior to the collapse. And so thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I think that they feed on each other. The collapse is, as anybody who's paying attention, is well underway. especially looking at Europe right now. I mean, the euro is falling apart. It's a slow train wreck, but it is a train wreck nonetheless. I mean, there's no way that Europe is going to have the money to bail out Spain and Italy. And Italian bonds right now, 10-year bonds, are over 7%, I think, last time I looked, which is unsustainable. The interest on that debt is so high that it wipes out the ability to do anything for the people of Spain, you know. And Italy is close behind, and so I think that inevitably there will be defaults on debt, and any default on debt basically reduces our money supply, and it reduces our the value of money in our collective psyche and that kind of thing, and encourages more defaults. It's like, okay, well, I see that these people have defaulted and they seem like they're doing better off now, that they don't have this huge debt and interest overhang. Like, maybe we should default too. And if there's a culture of default, right, then money and debt stops having so much power.
But the interesting thing is that we are defaulting on money that was created out of thin air.
Yes. Yeah.
So the problem is predominantly psychological.
Yes, it is. It's a story. It's a social contract, and there's nothing real that needs to be changed. It's social contracts that need to be changed.
Exactly.
And if we change our languaging, it's much easier to change our political landscape if the language is changed, because the politicians have to cater to the language of the political landscape. Yeah. And so when politicians ideally, I would advocate moving to a political system where each of us has power. We don't have representative officials that are controlling everything. But I think we've got a little ways to go on that. But
we're probably, just because of sheer numbers. And, I look at a lot of the stuff that goes on, say, at Occupy with Consensus. I mean, a lot of it turns out to be, democracy through exhaustion. The group still in the room at the end of it wins.
Well, I think that
I don't think that that's a good paradigm. So
I agree with that.
Representative government of some nature is probably going to be needed, but selling it to the highest bidder is probably not the way to go.
Well, we have Kindista is a project of a nonprofit called Common Goods Network, and it's not. We have other ideas of things that we want to do with our other projects if we have enough support. One of them is building an online tool towards decision making, consensus building and decision making, and I think that there are very creative things that you can do online that you can't do in in-person consensus building meetings, and we don't probably have time to really get into that today, but I think that there are ways, using technology, using the internet, there are ways of making decisions collectively in large groups that you can't do in an Occupy meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably a better choice. Yeah. And with that, we have run out of time, and it was an absolute pleasure to sit here with you, and I'd love to do this again.
Great.
And this one kind of wandered a bit, but we'll do better. We'll focus better in the future. And I thank you, and we will see you guys next time.
Okay. Thanks, Joe.
There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there telling me I got to beware. I think it's time